Scripture is the salvation of a righteous man or woman in his or her household. This has always been God's promise from Noah. When God saved Noah, God didn't just save Noah, but He saved his wife and his children and their spouses through that flood in Genesis 6. And then God found a righteous man named Abraham, who was a man of faith. And God promised him the nations. But as God gave him the nations, He said, the way that you will bring salvation is through the salvation and the ordering of your own household in Genesis 18. And so Abraham, this man of promise, gave attention to his household. And then God gave him the promise of the salvation of many. Lot, a controversial man that many of us would say didn't look too righteous, but God counted him as righteous in a very utterly decadent society. And yet even Lot, God saved him and his household from a burning city and brought them to a place of refuge. Joseph, a man that God gave dreams to say, one day your family too will come and be saved. God took him on a multiple-year journey. And through that multiple-year journey, God took him to Egypt. And through him, 70 of his household were saved and taken to a place of refuge where they could become a mighty nation. Rahab, a prostitute, someone that was not a part of the covenant, but because she did a righteous act by sheltering the spies, God promised her salvation, and anyone that she could fit into her little house in that wall would be saved when the walls of Jericho came down. God saved Rahab and all of her household. There's a woman who we don't even know her name. The Shunammite woman is what we call her. And through her righteous acts, she provided for a prophet named Elisha. And when the days of famine came, she's the only one that we know of in all of Israel that God saved and sent to a new place with all of her household to save them from the famine. The demoniac. No one liked the demoniac. If anyone had zero oikos in our minds, it's the demoniac. But when God radically saved this man, He said, go back to your friends and tell them the great things God has done for you. And he went out to 10 cities. And when he went out to 10 cities, the next time Jesus came, people from those 10 cities brought all their sick to Jesus. What an impact he had in his household. There was an official who didn't believe. But when his son died, he asked for Jesus to come and pray for his son and to heal his son. And that child, in his death, led to the salvation of this official and his entire family. Dorcas, a woman who was known for her good deeds. And she was making garments for all of these widows, and she died. But when Peter came and revived her, it was brought the salvation of a huge number of people, including the widows that were around her, because of her good acts. Cornelius is the classic. A centurion who's responsible for many, many people. And God took the gospel to the Gentiles really for the first time through Cornelius. And God promised him, I will bring salvation to you and to all of your household. And when Cornelius heard that, he gathered into his upper room as many people as he could. And when Peter got there, there was a large crowd of family and friends. And in one instant, God saved everyone who belonged to Cornelius. Lydia, this businesswoman, when she met Paul, it wasn't just that she got saved, but she and her whole household believed, and a church began to meet in her house. And in that same place in Philippi, a jailer who was opposed to the gospel, who was sleeping through the singing, when an earthquake shook the prison doors and the lights were finally brought on, and he was about to kill himself, he asked, what must I do to be saved? And Paul told him, you must believe, you and all your household. And that night, his entire household was saved. Crispus, a leader of a synagogue, which was leading a persecution against Paul and his team, somehow miraculously, God brought the message of salvation to Crispus. And it says that he and his entire family believed. And then they began to move next door and met in a building next door to the synagogue. And the church began to meet in that place. But lest we think that it was just these people, our Lord modeled for us what it was to reap his oikos. His brothers belittled him. They ignored him. His family thought he was crazy. But even at the cross, Jesus was watching out for his mother. And when the church began to meet after Jesus' resurrection and his ascension, who's leading? The apostles and the women and Mary and the brothers of Jesus. Jesus was never going to neglect his family, even though he was in the harvest. God gave him all who belonged to him. But let me ask you a question. Because our oikos can be our biological world, can be our geographical world, can be our vocational world, and our volitional world, people that we pursue as friends. Can you think of some examples of people whose families were saved up here? Most of them, right? Noah is a good example. But can you think of some whose geographical world got saved? The demoniac's a good example of that, right? Anyone that their vocational world got saved? Lydia, Dorcas, and what's that? Cornelius. What about the volitional world?
That one's Dorcas, right?
I think that's Dorcas. I think she's in this sewing club with all of these widows, and God brings salvation to this little sewing club that she's got. We don't know exactly what that was. But you guys, can you see this from the beginning to the end? Mm-hmm. This is God's promise.